weigh in.
That's great,
Why are you so defensive?
What are you doing? Hey, well,
I told Jack.
Look at your fucking shit on you fucking. Sprints, and we would do like
this fucking thing. I drove here, took a shower for this.
Oh, dude, those are such classic clips. I don't always play the intro, but sometimes I'm like, we got to bring it back just a little bit and just see what this thing has whole become, man. Only, 108 episodes. The home of constant content constantly being released, Ski Max Collective. We are here with James Flippin, who used to be, if I am not wrong, a producer for the Artie Lang Quitter podcast, which, that's where I learned everything about podcasting. I followed Artie from the Stern Show and then listened relentlessly to that show. And I remember you just being in the background. Were you actually there at the time? Because I know it was a lot older. So you were probably with him, doing the show.
Yeah, so like basically the way it started with me and Artie was back in, I was actually trying to think about this before we started the episode. It would have been 2014 or 2015 or
Wow.
Maybe even 2013. Whenever he had his DirecTV show.
Okay, yes. So that one with Nick DiPaolo at first.
Yeah. I started on that show, believe it or not. And I've told this story before on my podcast, but I might as well tell you. I got the job based off a Craigslist ad. I was working as a board op at Sirius XM and, working 7 different part-time jobs because that's what you do when you're breaking into broadcasting and stuff like that and looking for other gigs. Yeah. So I applied to this thing that said, late night radio show with big personality. And I was like, yeah, right. Some joke. And I got an email back from a direct address and I was surprised. And the guy says, it's for this Artie Lang show. And I was like, you got to be fucking shitting me.
Yeah, like you obviously know who that is if you're into broadcasting. You're like, fuck. I mean, that's got to be crazy.
I was not like the biggest Artie fan because like I wasn't a Stern guy per se. Like, growing up in my mom's car, it's kind of funny actually. Like my mom's car, it was probably sports talk radio.
Right.
My dad's car, it was like political right-wing radio, stuff like that. So it was never Stern. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I just didn't grow up listening to it. So not that I have any problem with him. And I think some of his old shit is great. But I wasn't really that aware of Artie, except for the fact that my boys and I, being from Jersey, all loved Beer League. Beer League for us was like one of the best movies.
It was like how old were you when that movie came out?
In high school or whatever.
Of course. So then it would be a top 10 classic for you guys.
Like we smoked and went to the movie and we were just like, this is fucking amazing. Like this Lang is the best. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And I knew him from Mad TV and stuff like that. So, I got this job based off Craigslist. It was wild. I liked Nick DiPaolo. You know what I mean? Like I'd seen plenty of stand up and I liked his stuff. I always kind of connected. So I was there at that show, the DirecTV show, for like 2 months before the whole split between Nick and Artie.
So it seems like that show must have been going on for a while and they were kind of in a pinch to post a Craigslist ad. I mean, you're talking 2014, 15. I mean, they had to have known someone, but they're just like, we need to bring in someone new.
So what it was is that the guy that was running the board for them, this really great guy who knows a lot about broadcast equipment and stuff like that, and actually is very funny and had some good timing when it comes to stuff like that. He lived in Connecticut and was tired of making the drive down and actually did most of his work for the Dan Patrick Show because it was kind of all under the same umbrella.
You could tell both those shows are like equally produced. They have a lot of like similarities.
It was. I mean, obviously, the same studio. Actually, when Dan did his show from New York, they just kind of flipped a few signs around and put his stuff up, and it was okay. Here's the Dan Patrick studio. So, they had need for somebody who, in their terms, was like a radio board op, because they had people who came in and were like more music mixing people. And actually, I don't know if you ever watched that show or not, but on Friday nights, they had this segment that was sponsored by Guitar Center, I think it was.
Mhm.
And bands would come in and like play. Actually, they were stationed right behind me. I had to get earplugs because I mean, it's bitch, but like I was fucking losing my hearing, just getting so blasted out by these speakers every Friday night.
Is it in the studio? Like, because I've seen some of those bands in studios. Do they put on like the full sound, or is it more geared towards radio? Because like what you just said, it seems like it would be very loud, but when you're watching it, it looks so heavily produced. You know?
Yeah. So that was kind of an interesting thing because the guy who mixed the music on Friday nights, he was very advanced in terms of like, you know, he knew what he was doing. I think he'd done stuff for like professional musicians in terms of mixing albums and stuff like that. He himself was a musician. I can't remember if he played like the clarinet or saxophone or something, but he was on top of that stuff. So they mixed that Friday night show very well.
Right.
As far as what I was putting out on the radio side, it was dog shit because it was so and like totally blown out and just like, you know, a tiny little just like stub of audio that was going out over the airwaves. But on the DirecTV audio mixing, it probably sounded really good because they had a show that was like that. I can't even remember what it was called, but like, you know, whatever that audience network thing was. That was mixed in with that. So anyway, when that show ended, to kind of just jump ahead in the storyline to the podcast, Artie and Dan had said something like, well, you know, we'll stay in touch with you because we'd still like to do something, maybe a podcast or something like that. And, you know, at that point, podcasts were starting to really like take off more.
Yeah. Like I know at that time, like Robert Kelly had his thing out, and then people started, you know, having free subscriptions to radio, and they didn't have to sign up to pay $12 a month just to listen to Stern. They could hear Artie and different outlets.
Yeah. Of course, Artie's podcast was charged people, but
well, I don't think, did it start charging at the beginning? I can't remember because
I think it did. I think eventually it sort of was out there though.
I remember paying like $6 a month or something crazy like that, and it was worth it. I mean, I've probably heard every episode twice.
Especially at the beginning of his run with it, he was putting out a lot of stuff because what we would do is like take maybe like 3 hours of stuff that he had done, and we could make that into, you know, 3 different episodes or something like that. Or if he had a guest on, you know, it's like it's like the way radio always worked. You can deconstruct that and turn it into a podcast that's going to then have like 4 different episodes in one, in a way.
Yeah.
You know, the guest that you have on, then you also have his monologue about whatever happened with the food that he ordered or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but most of the time to be going back to the time when he first started it, I was there in the apartment with him in the condo.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
And then eventually it got to the point where I wasn't there as much because he started doing the show at like 2 o'clock.
Probably 2 a.m. He's just like firing it up. You can always tell, like if you go back to the catalog of episodes, when it just started to like downfall a little bit. But for me, as a fan of his, those were some of my favorite too. I do have to ask, because I started my show as a Kevin Brennan wrap-up show. So I used to wrap up MLC each week. Were you there for that classic episode whenever he got in a fight with him about the Facebook Live?
No. The only time I'm trying to think if there was any like notable confrontations that happened while I was there of that type. No, I wasn't there for that. You know, most of the time, my biggest connection to that podcast was in the earliest days of it. And then I was also there when they went up to Montreal and did an episode up there.
Right. I remember that.
I, you know, edited a lot of the episodes after the fact, and to the extent that we edited it, it was like, I'd compress the whole thing.
Just upload
audio compression,
right.
Put on slap the intro on just slap the outro on, and just basically upload it. You know, it wasn't really like that much editing for
I
me.
mean, what was there? I mean, you don't have to tell me what it is, but was there ever a time where Artie came up to you, was like, "Look, we can't put that out. You're gonna have to cut this clip about something he may have said," because like that's one of those shows I don't think I ever heard like a misinterpretation. You know, it just went all the way through.
Well, first of all, I'll put it to you this way: it was never because of whatever Artie said, because he couldn't give a fuck less.
Right.
But there was definitely times where guests would be like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure if that came out the way that I like or I wanted it to, or that could get me in some issues or whatever."
Yeah.
You know, that did happen a couple of times. And Dan would be the one to text me and be like, "All right, from this time to that time." And I would always fuck with him too. Because I would be like, dude, this is the best part of the fucking episode.
Yeah, it's not that bad. It's good.
Yeah, I was like, we can't cut this. And he would be like, don't fuck with me. You're gonna fuck up and upload it and da da da. Because I think one time, either I did legitimately miss something that I was supposed to cut out, or he didn't tell me about it or something like that.
Yeah. Like he told you maybe after the fact. It's like, dude, the podcast is already uploaded.
Yeah, and thank God. Like, you know, it's kind of just one of those things where it's not like a Twitter thing with like a very
Right.
account or something where everybody screenshots it. I mean, we did fix it like pretty soon after it. There probably weren't that many people that actually like automatically downloaded it when it first came out. So chances are it wasn't even out to many people. But who knows? There are some people out there that probably have that MP3 on their fucking phone or some shit.
Somebody wants me to ask you about Boschetti and the twins. Have you were you on that episode?
Well, let's see. So did the twins actually call in to the episode?
I think so. I believe that's what happened. I don't remember that one off the top of my head. Somebody just told me to ask you about it.
Well, the twins were on that DirecTV show.
Okay, yeah.
And I mean, that, you know, to be honest with you, that whole experience was
probably a blur, because I mean you're getting thrown in this huge world, and the next thing you know, it just comes crashing down.
It was great, man. I mean, I made the best money that I'd ever made before in broadcasting. I mean, at this point now, I'm like doing basically as well as I did back then. But again, that was 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was making money that I had not made before, because, you know, anytime TV is involved, it just makes more, you just get more.
Don't want to know at you because they just want the product to be put out, you know, as long as you're doing a good job.
You know, it's just a different thing. So, you know, I was getting that. The show was 3 hours a night. You know what I mean? Like, we hung out for a little bit before. We'd go out after to like bars around the area. Like, it was great. It was like a totally surreal experience. So the twins were great. I mean, I wasn't really close friends with them or anything. I didn't really talk to them that often. I mean, to be honest with you, I was in the middle of like a hustle myself back then. I still worked at an audio production place in New Jersey from like 10 in the morning until like 5 or whatever it was. Then I would usually like drive back to my cousin's place in Montclair, take a couple bong hits, drive into the city and do the whole Artie show, and be done at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and drive home, go to sleep, and like do the whole thing over again. So like, it wasn't as much of like I didn't embrace it as much as I maybe could have or should have. Like, looking back on it, I wish I had tried to be like maybe like more antagonistic and be in terms of like, I mean, I had a mic in front of me that I controlled.
I remember sometimes you butting in, you know, especially when it came to sports.
I would sometimes, and I kind of wish that I had done it more in a way, because you know, it just would have been that much better probably for me personally. But Boschetti was funny, man. I mean, like, you know, he's a character and a half. Obviously, he did come on the podcast for sure a couple of times. And then obviously Artie and he had that show that they did together kind of semi-recently, the Halfway House.
It was very briefly. The Halfway House. I think they did like, I can't remember how many episodes, but it wasn't a lot. And that was before everything happened. And, you know, people are saying he's in hiding. You know, we've heard a couple confirmations that, you know, he's just laying low, but he's still alive. But a lot of people don't believe that he's alive. It's like he's like making this whole conspiracy about him because he has so many fans.
Well, I mean, look, as far as I know, he's definitely alive. You know, I've heard that like he's never going to be like doing stand up ever again.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that, but I think that he could still definitely do a podcast, and I think
For
that
sure. I mean, the guy's got a voice for podcasting.
he's
He
fucking
knows
great.
how to bring a crowd together and just pick on people and let them like slash back at him. And
Yeah,
I can't remember who the
that's exactly right. That whole like radio slash and burn antagonistic thing, like he's a master of that.
yeah,
And,
and people are fans of that because like a lot of people they listen to that kind of stuff because they feel like they would love to just sit around chopping up with their boys, but a lot
Right.
of people they're not all comics, so some people could get mad at that, and then they're just listening. Trying to remember the guy. What was the name of the guy that was born in the toilet? That was always on this. Chris Cotton. Chris Cotton. Those guys going back and forth. That was some funny ass podcasting back in the day.
yeah, man. Believe it or not, the late Chris Cotton.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what. That's just. Yeah, it's a sad part.
It's crazy, man. He was a great guy. I mean, like
He was a Philly guy, right?
He was a Philly guy. He was a stand-up comedian, and
Yeah.
I don't really exactly know how he ended up getting connected with Artie on that show, but sometime either during the time that it was DirecTV, and then maybe after going into the podcast, he and Artie connected, or sometime before that. And Artie said, whenever I start my own podcast, I got you, and come on the show and this, that, the other thing, do your thing. And, he did. And some of those episodes were fucking hilarious. I mean,
some of those were some of the funniest podcast episodes I've ever heard. That, and when Artie's just ranking on Dan about the dryer balls was always classic.
Yeah.
And then him just having an intro song with an AC. He's like, "This is my intro." Like, did you agree to that? Like, you probably told him, like, "Dude, I can make you an intro." He's like, "No, this is funny enough."
Is that I think we did have that, like we had like a 15-second intro that really was legitimately like an intro thing where Dan had gotten some professional voiceover person to be like the Artie Quitter podcast or whatever. And we did play or something like that. There was something that we played.
It featured what's her name? The lady that passed a couple years ago, where she's on the Tonight Show and she says, "Is it funnier that I outlive Artie Lang?"
Oh,
she was in that intro. Joan Rivers, yeah, that was the intro you're talking about.
Yeah. So, but what happened was then Artie would get like pissed if he found out. He was like, "No, I want just the fucking air conditioner noise." You know what I mean? Like, I don't want any of that shit, So there was plenty of times where I fucking loved it. I think shit like that is hilarious. So
it's so funny because at that point is when podcasting started blowing up, and everybody's like, so focused on the production and how good everything's going to be, and he's just holding his microphone and air conditioning.
Yeah,
there's something classic about that, and
that's. I could picture the way it was all set up because we had a ridiculously long XLR cable that let him have the microphone all the way over on the couch. And because when it first started, everybody would sort of sit at the dining room table. It was sort of more like traditional, broadcast setup.
Right.
And later it kind of morphed into Dan sitting at the board and Artie sitting on the couch. And him talking about the orange towels that he turned into the Bengals helmet.
Yeah. He would just clown him all the time on his towels. So now Gino Bisconti is one of the regulars at some of the secret shows that we put on, or excuse me, that Matt Mead puts on. That's really when I learned about him because it'd be so funny when Artie would just lay into Gino.
Oh yeah,
because Gino's one of the type of dudes that can take a hit,
exactly,
all day. And I think Artie probably knew that, and that's what made some of that show so good.
Well, again, for me, that goes back to the DirecTV show because I didn't know Gino before then, but he came on those DirecTV shows, and it always seemed like they would book him in like the last segment of the last hour, which is so fucked up. So he would have to be like shot out of a complete fucking cannon to get anything across or make anything happen. And the way that Artie would sort of like just be so disgusted by his actions, and then like the incredulous nature that Gino would respond, it killed me every time. I mean, I thought it was great. And then when he started coming on the podcast, actually, you talk about like Artie getting into it with people. Gino and I once kind of screamed on each other.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it was during the playoffs where the Mets were playing the Dodgers.
Okay.
And Chase Utley slid into this one player. He really fucking basically slide tackled him
Yeah.
and broke his leg. And Gino, being the scumbag Philly fan that he is, was like, celebrating this fact or whatever, saying it was a clean play. And I was like, get the fuck out of here. It was a dog
It was a
shit.
dirty play. Yeah.
Yeah. We were going back and forth about that.
It's the playoffs.
But Gino's great. I always, Gino was the kind of guy that I could actually chat with during the breaks at that DirecTV show, as opposed to
Right.
I don't know, when Danny Aiello is sitting there or something, and I'm just not, I'm just sort of not in my own business or whatever.
You're just like, I can't get engaged with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gino is one of the type of those guys that can just light up a room and kind of just talk to everybody and move around a bit, which is kind of what I respect about him.
Mhm.
And as you know, he's at Compound. What do you think about Artie's? I don't mean to make this whole podcast about Artie, but
No, it's all right. You said you told me that you wanted to. I mean, it's kind of
nostalgic in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't. Again, I talked to Dan, talked to him a little bit. I talked to him before we did this episode, just because I wanted to sort of see what was up with him, thinking about Artie and stuff.
Right.
And I actually reconnected with Gino because I'm Facebook friends with him. So I reached out to him and I was like, yo, I still want to try to get you on my podcast at some point. And he was like, yeah, cool. We'll figure that out. And I was like, by the way, I'm very hurt that you don't follow me on Twitter or whatever. And but he did now with his many time banned account.
Yeah, I'm about to say, now that he's on his 5th account, he probably starts to forget who to follow and who not to, especially if you're not tweeting at him.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. But no, I mean, you could definitely ask me about whatever with Artie, because I mean,
we'll wrap it up on this point, I guess. But what do you feel about his tenure doing the whole Artie Anthony show? Do you feel like that was kind of a downfall for him, and he kind of felt like he could do whatever he wanted at Compound Media, or were you a fan of that show? I mean, it was a complete disaster. I mean, in everybody's books. I mean, nobody could deny that. I mean, there were some episodes where he was really good, but there was episodes that was like, all right, take the sunglasses off. Let's see what's really going on.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I'll say this, I guess. I've never heard much of it because I was doing, again, so many different fucking jobs. I didn't have really time to listen to barely my own podcast, which I was still regularly doing at the time. So I kind of just knew through Twitter and just kind of the general feel and what was kind of going on and what people were saying. And I can't remember for sure, but I think I might have even had some people I followed specifically just so I could kind of keep tabs on what the fuck was going on with that show. Yeah. And I could tell it wasn't going well.
Right.
And I mean, no, does it surprise me? I mean, no, not really. I mean, I think you're probably right that he probably did feel like he could do whatever the fuck he wanted, or didn't. He felt some, who knows? I couldn't even try to get inside his head, but something along the lines of, I don't really deserve this. I'm kind of banking off past shit. He gets very self-conscious about that type of shit.
Yeah, that's true.
He's not going to let himself even try and pull out of it. It's just going to be a continuing spiral from there.
Because I mean, it is weird doing shows in that studio because you got the green screen behind you and everything. It when you're watching it, it's like, okay, this is going to be crazy, and they do a hell of a production over there. But when you're sitting in there doing a show, it's so bright, and you have the green screen behind you. So he probably just wasn't used to that kind of studio compared to being at a place like Howard or DirecTV. Or anything like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, or certainly not, what obviously Howard ended up, becoming even more so in terms of Howard TV. And it'd been a while since he had been associated with something like that, or even a TV show. To go from something as low key as I'm literally going to get out of bed whenever I feel like it and start doing my show, and then kind of having to go into Manhattan every day to a studio and be on with, I think it was sort of I can just imagine from what I saw from the outside looking in, it was probably going from 0 to 60. You know what I mean? Yeah.
After he's been able to relax for a while and just kind of do his own thing, which I really wish he would have never stopped doing that show, man. That was my introduction into podcasting, was the Artie Quitter show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think that and what do I know? I mean, I feel like I'm totally speculating on some of this shit, but I mean, at the same time, a podcast is like you have your own pressure to be your own like hustler and entrepreneur and say, I'm just going to do an episode every day or every week or whatever it may be. And when you have a gig and it's like you have to show up at this time to get paid, some people sort of prefer that way of looking at it because it's like, I'm being told what it is I have to do, but I'm getting paid for it. You know what I mean? Opposed to whatever a podcast is.
Right. Like you can rest all day and you know when you have to be there versus, all right, I'm just going to wake up at 2 a.m. and just start talking into a microphone, which, I mean, granted, he's got the talent to do so. So, like you say, 0 to 60 between both of them.
Yeah. And it's probably not the best thing in the world for almost anybody to be like that. I think
not at all.
In the last, year or whatever with this lockdown shit, it's actually kind of healthy to be part of like the human race to an extent.
And to have a schedule. It's very healthy to have a schedule.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I understand that was not a success, and it's a shame that that's the case. But I guess it doesn't surprise me.
Have you ever rented any comics that you just didn't like? Doesn't matter what podcast, but just anybody in general that you were just like, this guy's a fucking asshole. Like, just cut it out. Like, you're kind of going over the top or anything like that?
Like in person, you mean?
In person or on a podcast, I mean, either or. Like, have you ever had a guest or anybody like that where you're like, all right, this guy.
I'm trying to think. I mean, because for me, I feel like so much of it is, there's definitely times where like, I might not agree with somebody's views on something. You know what I mean? Maybe that's where I would kind of like come down on. I don't think what you're saying is funny because it just doesn't, like, I don't see the world the same way as you, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And again, since we follow each other on Twitter, you could probably allude to what I'm talking about, like more I'm saying like on the political side of things or whatever,
Of course.
No, I mean, honestly, I don't know. I think what I kind of respect about comedians is that for the most part, it's kind of like a dog eat dog world where people are less in their feelings than other people, or at least if they are, they're keeping it to themselves because they're going to get ragged on and all that kind of shit. But it's just kind of more my kind of speed, I guess, as opposed to some of the people that, in broadcasting, they take things very seriously. I work in news now, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of a bummer most of the time. I miss working with comedians, to be honest with you.
Okay.
That's the truth of it. Is that I kind of actually miss that because it was never for me a competitive thing. If I ever make somebody laugh, I enjoy that, but it's not like
especially like a comic or somebody well respected, you make them laugh. It's a good feeling.
Right. But I'm not a stand-up, I never was, and I never will be. So it was like, for me, I was kind of part of that whole world, but not really. It was just kind of like the outside looking in. So I always respected those people, even if they weren't necessarily my cup of coffee when it comes to the jokes they told or something like that.
Right.
I still respected them for what it was they did.
So tell us about your podcast. What do you got going on with that? How long you been doing it? What's the general strategy? Do you have guests? You do it alone?
I mean, I would like to get more into having guests on. There was a time when I did more. I've had that show since 2010, believe it or not. I went to broadcast school back then, worked at Sirius after that. This one buddy of mine, we were like, we should do, actually, really, it was more my cousin first. He was like, you need to, and he's a big Stern guy. He was like, you need to start doing hosting. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to get a job doing that, you need to start doing it. You know what I mean? Like, just start talking, do whatever.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, will you come with me and kind of just like do an episode? And he was like, yeah, sure. And again, back then, the term podcast was very, very, very new. This was like 2010, like I said.
Yeah.
So, we ended up getting it on iTunes and doing that whole thing. Back then, I called it Garden State Radio. Now I call it Flippin' Out Radio.
That's better.
Yeah. The guy that I moved my website or my podcast to, it's called RadioMisfits.com. He was like, yeah, the whole Garden State Radio thing. He's like, no, like he's like, it sounds like it's some like thing about like civic issues in New Jersey, or
We're just
like
talking about like the local parks.
yeah, or like like the best way to grow tomatoes, or like something like that. So I changed it to Flippin' Out Radio, and it's kind of just like whatever, like it's stupid shit that I started thinking about throughout the week. I'll email myself and say, all right, this is what we'll talk about. Or this buddy of mine who I do a podcast with, he's a total fucking nut. So like he'll always have something to talk about. Come in and bring that up, and then we'll talk about that for 30 minutes for no reason. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I brought on the two co-hosts I have. I was doing this thing by myself until like episode 27. I can't remember, but as soon as I brought those guys on, man, it's fun because sometimes even if I don't feel like doing it, I know that they're going to be right there with some fucking bangers. At least one of those guys will be. So we just normally have.
It really does take the pressure off. There was a time where, again, when I first started doing my podcast, I had like 5 or 6 people on it. It was ridiculous. It was like a morning zoo with this woman who actually now does like morning radio in Detroit. My cousin who moved out to Denver, so he doesn't really do it with me anymore, and a couple other people that I went to broadcast school with. So it was just like, a zany hang where I would just try to like throw out like ridiculous things that would offend people and just
like Robert Kelly's show,
run around like checking their heads cut off, and I would just laugh, kind of say, and that's all the time we have for today. But then from there was kind of like a low point where I didn't really have anybody I did it with, and I kind of just did like my own thing. It was a lot of like monologues and just being angry. I was just like, this sucks. I don't enjoy this. You know what I mean? Like this is just like being angry for 30 minutes and not fun.
That sounds fun. I mean, I could probably get into something like that now. Again, that's pretty sure how I started. I used to cook on the show. Like I would try all different kinds of shit. Like I'd have a hot plate, just cooking steaks while I'm just sitting here ragging on people. I was a nobody from East Texas. That's what made it fun.
Yeah.
And people found out about the shit, and it's just it's different how shows can evolve and then uninvolve just as fast.
That's true. Yeah, no, that's definitely true, especially with podcasts, right? I mean, I feel like I read a new article about that every day. Like, X amount of million podcasts launched yesterday, X amount of million canceled, or like something like that.
It's crazy. Like my listeners will go like all the way from the top, all the way to the bottom. Like, what are they listening to? And I'm like, we got to do something different here, boys. So let's start doing some remote shows. Like, I'm going to do some shows on a boat or just something wild like that. Just in the middle of nowhere. Because people are, now everything's opening back up. People are getting tired of this whole Zoom thing. It's like, oh, let me just sit here and listen to 2 jerk-offs talk,
That's true. No, I definitely think that people's appetite for the whole Zoom thing, you're right. That's a good way of putting it. It kind of, it's jumped the shark now, as they say.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it was fun at first, and then now it's just like, all right, it kind of looks lazy.
It not only that, but in studio podcast stuff is so much better too, because like you lose stuff, not to get like overly technical or whatever, but you lose stuff with the connection because like somebody,
it's not as fast. It's not as fast.
Yeah, you talk over somebody and then you lose what they said, or I mean, especially with some show where people are trying to be funny, it's just not the same. Or if somebody's in an argument and they're not in the same place, it doesn't sound as good. Over Zoom, so there's a lot to be said for actually doing a radio show or whatever you're calling it in the same place as somebody else. Yeah, or if you actually have the money to do it, then you could get like a IP codec or something like that, which is basically like being there. But again, those are expensive.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. You might as well just drive an hour, hang out with the boys.
Yeah, right.
And just fucking rip it. So Flippin, is that your real last name? I was thinking about that earlier today.
It is actually. Yeah.
Did you get clown? Did you ever get any clownery for that in high school?
Oh yeah. Like not so much in high school, because for whatever reason at that point it had just become Flip, and everybody just knew me as Flip, and it kind of like it just was over by then. But yeah, in middle school it was like everybody was loving the Flipper, faster than lightning, in gym class or whatever, and all that shit. But I it's great now because I mean it comes off as something that somebody. If I wish that I was like a music DJ or something, it'd be like Flippin' Records. You know what I mean? Like
That's almost sounds like a rap DJ.
You're playing the 1s and 2s. You know what I mean? Like that would be great. But
I'm here flipping records.
Yeah, exactly. That would be great. But again, no,
that's funny.
I never got into music radio. So
yeah,
it's my real name.
Not yet. No, I know you used to have a beard. Did you shave it for some reason? I just try to start growing mine out. You can't see it obviously because
Well,
I'm gonna rob a convenience store.
I feel like I could tell. I feel like I could tell there's a little mustache there. So I mean,
Yeah, there is. It's definitely not shit, but it's a mustache.
Well, God, I hope so. But at the same time, yeah, I did have a beard. I kind of fluctuate back and forth. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
most of the time, I feel like I just have a very base level beard, like not anything really big, but I did have that at one point, just kind of like a nice base level beard. But I buzzed it off recently. I just kind of get tired of it after a while. You know what I mean? Like I just
I'm already tired of it. This is the first time I've grown it out. I'm like, ugh, this is just annoying me.
I mean, if you actually want to do it, then you have to just kind of get through the point where it's not like I can't even imagine with the mask on and shit. But
It
I mean,
sucks. It's hot. I'm in a basement right now, and it's been pouring, and it's hot.
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm dealing with the same weather.
Yeah,
here,
of course.
and I'm also in the basement. I have air conditioning in my house, but it's not down here. So
yeah, not in the basement.
I went outside before, and it was actually cooler outside than it is down here.
Yeah,
and kind of cooled off. But I can feel it right up here, like right in my forehead. It's coming. I'm going to start to sweat soon.
Oh, it's already happening. It's happening here. It's happening all right here. Just pouring out. I'm like, all right, taking a shower. I'm going to be up early for work.
This is the
problem.
Before the days of like central air, which I mean, obviously, I don't know whoever has that or doesn't, or at least some unit, a window unit, hopefully that you could sleep with. This was the kind of weather where you took like 4 cold showers a day. That's all you could do.
Yeah.
It was just, just cold, just get in there. It was like the best feeling of the day.
Every time I get in the cold shower, I just sing Tenacious D. It just, for some reason, it just helps me get through the cold shower. I don't know why. But yeah, you're right. I only have to do cold showers up here because in Texas, like everybody has central air. It's just, kind of one of those things. Like if you have even the shittiest houses, it's got central air in it. There's at least a unit.
Where were you in Texas? You said East Texas?
Yeah, East Texas. It was between Dallas and Shreveport, right in between.
Okay. So what would it get like humid like this?
Oh yeah, it gets real humid and hot.
Yeah.
It's not a dry heat, not in the east part. Like you're gonna get all the way west of Dallas to start really feeling the dry heat. Because you got to remember it takes 12 hours to drive across the whole state. It doesn't look big on a map, but it's ridiculous.
I know. Well, that's one of those things where, like, I mean, I've always heard that where like the map is kind of not really properly to scale. When you think about it, like it's a lot bigger than you think it is. Like, people say that with Africa, like it's insane. Like you wouldn't even be able to fathom like how fucking massive it is. Yeah, Texas is one of those things. I've never actually even been to Texas, so
really?
I know Houston, for example, gets like very humid.
Yeah. My whole family lives there now. They all moved down there recently, but
so
yeah, it's
Connecticut.
Why or when?
Both.
I moved here to do this podcast because both my co-hosts live here. We all met over the Twitter world through Kevin Brennan's show and all that, and I moved up here in September. So I got to experience the winter and my first real snow. And then, now I'm like, it does get hot here. I wasn't expecting it to get this kind of hot, like after the heat wave or whatever. I was like, man, I'm fucking sweating.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, the mid-Atlantic, I guess, it gets that hot. I'm sure it gets it. Well, Portland and Seattle was like 115 the other day.
Right. Yeah. They just got bombed.
But I mean, I would say like this type of stuff that like that heat wave that we had, like we will usually get like at least one of those, like sometime. Usually, I would think in July or maybe like early August.
Yeah,
for the most part. But
it's funny they call it a heat wave. That's like all summer long in Texas, like 94, 95 degrees.
Yeah, that is. You probably you scoff at such things. You scoff at that.
Yeah. I'm just like, a heat wave. What is that? It better be 130. I want to bake. Like the show I did on Galveston Beach, it was 115 that day. The mask was just soaked. I'm like, why am I doing this again?
Yeah.
That was like right when I first started. I'm like, I got 40 views.
Yeah,
I just suffered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, you got to pay the
pay your dues. You know?
Yep.
Exactly. So where can people find you? We'll wrap this up a little short today if you want. We'll always have you back, especially when I have the other boys on.
Yeah, sure.
And we could talk because I know one of the hosts, Jim Stansel, would love to talk to you as well, and we could do that. So,
he's a Mets fan, I think, right?
Yeah, he's a Mets fan. Islanders. He loves all those guys.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I'm a fan of. I'm starting to convert. You know, now that I've been here long enough, I'm starting to leave my Astros and be like, I kind of want to go to a Mets game.
Yeah.
I'm not being a phony. This is just where I live now.
Right. And also the whole trash can thing, you know, like, I mean,
I didn't like that. I didn't like it with the signs and all that. That pissed me off. I'm like, you guys could have won it fair and square anyways, but you're still going to go out and fucking have a cheating time.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
But at the same time, I love Carlos Beltran, so we'll just leave it.
We'll see what team he goes to next.
Yeah. So as far as like where people can find me, I have a Twitter account. It's James Flippin. It's at JAMADROP, JAMADROP. And then my podcast is on radiomisfits.com. And it's Flippin' Out Radio. That's it, Flippin' Out Radio. But it's also on all those other ones because he uploads it to, you know, all the different platforms.
Oh, so it just goes to all the platforms and things like that.
Yeah.
Who else was on Radio Misfits there for a while? Was it Florentine on there for a little bit?
Yeah. I think that's right. Maybe before he went to Barstool or something like. There's been. I mean, the guy who does it, he knows like everybody. He was trying to get Artie's podcast. I think for a while, Artie's podcast was like featured on Radio Misfits.
I think it was. I believe that Radio Misfits rings a bell.
It's kind of coming back to me now. I think we had like a free episode that we put out like once per week.
Right.
And that was on Radio Misfits. Like we would pick like one episode and just say, all right, we're going to put this one up on the free website. Yeah. Kind of like a promotional thing or whatever.
Cool, man. That's awesome.
But so that my podcast is on there. And if you just Google Flippin' Out Radio, you'll find it. But
good.
Soon enough, I hope to get you down here to Jersey. You said you got a buddy in Newark.
I got it. Yeah, I got a buddy that's real close to you in Newark, and he's always having me come down to help him rewire some of the things in his house. So I know he's got a couple more things for me. So that'll give me the perfect excuse to come down. It'd be fun. Yeah.
When you say are you like an electrician, or you do like broadcast stuff professionally?
I do it's like a handyman type thing work. You know, like I know how it all works, but I'm not licensed or anything. That's why I don't do it for payment, just payment for some other stuff.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, I got the sniffles.
I understand.
But James, it was great having you on, man. I've been following you on Twitter for a long time, and I hope we can do it again. And I'll be down there soon.
Yeah, Ski Mask, absolutely. Appreciate it. It's fun to come on. I was pleasantly surprised when you asked me to do it because I know I have a comedian based show. You know what I mean? But I guess I'm tertiary connected to those people in a way. So
now you're back in it. Next thing you know, you'll be doing Misery Loves Company, and you'll forget all about me again, and it'll be great.
Yeah,
all right. Everybody, go check out the shows at Ski Mask Collective. New T-shirts up, skimaskcollective.com. Go get those shirts. They're good brand. It's not that Gildan bullshit that makes your neck itch. That shit sucks. And just keep listening to the show. It's going to get bigger and better. The boys will be back. I know they've been taking a couple of absent breaks, but look, they're living their best summer lives. I'm just, doing my podcast because that's what I like to do. They're doing what they like to do. So we'll be back in a couple of days because all you know is constant content constantly being released. That's what we do here at Ski Mask Collective. James, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely, brother. Thanks for having me.